I spent 41 years teaching other men how to protect their money. Turns out I couldn't protect my own from the one person I never thought to watch. It doesn't happen the way you'd expect. Nobody breaks into your house. Nobody holds a gun to your head. No, it happens slower than that, quieter than that, the way termites take down a house from the inside, while the paint outside still looks fresh. You don't feel the floor give until the day you're standing on nothing at all. That was me. Walter Briggs, 68 years old, retired financial advisor, 31 years with the same firm downtown, a good reputation, a clean name, a modest but paid-off house on Larchmont Avenue, in a quiet corner of Tulsa, Oklahoma, the kind of street where the oak trees are older than most of the people living under them. My late wife, Carol, picked that house in 1994. She said the kitchen window caught the morning light just right, and that was that. We raised 2 kids in that house. Carol passed 6 years ago, breast cancer, and I have lived alone since, which is its own kind of quiet you never fully get used to. But I want to tell you what happened 11 months ago, because I think about it every single day, and because if it happened to me, a man who spent his whole career reading financial statements for a living, it can happen to anyone you love. I have a grandson, Marcus, my daughter's boy, 26 years old, sharp mind, good with numbers. The kind of young man who could talk his way into any room and make you feel like the conversation was the best part of his day. When he lost his job at the logistics company last spring, I didn't think twice. I told him to move in with me for a few months while he got back on his feet. I told myself I was helping him. What I didn't know is that he was already helping himself. I will tell you exactly what he did, step by step, because it matters. But first, do me one favor. If stories like this mean something to you, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments if you have ever trusted someone you shouldn't have. I read every single one of them. My cardiologist Dr. Patel is a careful man, the kind who explains things twice before he lets you leave the room. Quiet voice, steady hands, the sort of doctor who has delivered enough hard news that he knows how to slow it down so it doesn't knock you flat. He told me in March that my heart wasn't doing what it used to do. Nothing fatal, not yet, but enough that he wanted me on a strict regimen, blood thinners, beta blockers, a monitor I had to wear for 2 weeks that beeped every time I climbed the stairs too fast. I drove home from St. Francis Hospital on 61st Street with that news sitting in my chest like a stone. I sat in my driveway on Larchmont for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I thought about the retirement account, $412,000. Every dollar of it built slow and careful over 3 decades, because that's what I taught my clients to do and I practiced what I preached. Not $1 of it was for a boat or a cruise or anything a man my age is supposed to want. It was for the years I had left, however many that turned out to be, and it was for my daughter Renee and her boy Marcus in case something happened to me before I expected it to. 2 days after that appointment, Marcus called. His voice had that warmth in it, that steadiness. "Grandpa," he said, "I heard about your heart from Mom. I'm not letting you go through this by yourself. I'm coming to stay with you, help you get to appointments, help around the house. That's not up for discussion. I want you to understand something about me. I don't cry easily. 41 years in an industry where showing emotion could cost you a client. I learned to keep my face still no matter what number was on the screen. I cried on that phone call. Couldn't get a full sentence out for a solid minute. I thought about Carol, about how much she would have loved seeing her grandson step up like that, how she always said Marcus had more heart than he let people see. I thought. She was right about him all along. I didn't sleep that night. But it was the good kind of sleepless. The kind where your chest feels lighter instead of heavier. Now I need you to hold on to something while I keep telling you this story. Every kind gesture I'm about to describe, every time Marcus made my life easier over the next several months, I want you to remember one fact I didn't learn until much later. The first unauthorized transfer out of my retirement account happened 6 days after that phone call. 6 days. He wasn't moving in because his grandfather needed him. He was moving in because he saw a door standing open, and I was the one who'd left it that way. But I didn't know that yet. So let me tell you what I saw, because what I saw was good enough to fool a man who spent his whole career trained to spot exactly this kind of thing. Marcus settled into the guest room like he'd always belonged there. He drove me to every cardiology appointment, Sat in the waiting room, scrolling his phone, but always looked up the second the nurse called my name. He learned the names of everyone on my care team. Doctor. Patel told me once that it was rare to see a grandson so present, so engaged, and I stood there in that hallway prouder than I'd been in years. Marcus took over the bills, the insurance calls, the grocery runs to the Reesers on 71st Street, the pharmacy pickups at the Walgreens on Yale. He handled everything that had started to feel too heavy for me to lift, and he made it look easy, and I thanked whatever was listening for sending him to me. What I did not know was that he was studying every account number, every login, every password sticky noted to the inside of my desk drawer like a man reading a map of a house he planned to rob. 6 weeks in, I had a bad stretch with the heart monitor, 3 false alarms in 1 week, a trip to the emergency room that turned out to be nothing but scared me anyway. I hadn't slept in 4 days. I forgot to pay the water bill for the first time in my life. That same week, Marcus sat down across from me at the kitchen table with a folder. He set it down slow, deliberate, like he'd rehearsed the moment. "Grandpa, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to really hear me on this." He had a way of speaking that felt careful, patient, like he'd studied exactly which words would land the hardest. "You're 68. Your heart isn't what it used to be. If something happens to you, and I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying it because I love you, what happens to everything you've built? The house, the retirement account, all of it just freezes. Lawyers, courts, months of nothing while the family you left behind can't touch a dime of what you meant for them to have." I sat with that. Every word hit exactly where I was most afraid, like he'd been standing in my bedroom at 3 in the morning listening to the thoughts I never said out loud. "These are power of attorney papers," he said, opening the folder slow, giving me all the time in the world to look. "It just means I can handle the financial side while you focus on getting better. You've done enough for this family your whole life, Grandpa. Let me carry some of it now." I looked at those papers. My eyes were tired. My hands were tired. I was running on fear and love, and the particular exhaustion of a man who has just been told his heart is failing him, the kind of tired that gets into your judgment before you even notice it's happened. I signed. Marcus told me the next morning he'd already had it notarized at a shipping store on Memorial Drive. Said it casual, like it was nothing worth mentioning twice. And, God forgive me, I slept better that night than I had in weeks. I thought I'd finally handed something heavy to someone strong enough to hold it. What I'd actually done was hand him the keys to everything I had. Fast forward through 8 months of pill organizers and cardiology visits, and days I felt fine and days I didn't. 8 months of watching Marcus become, in my mind, the best parts of the boy I remembered and the man I hoped he'd grow into. My daughter Renee lives 2 hours away in Oklahoma City with her husband Daniel, who works compliance and fraud prevention for a regional credit union. Quiet man, the kind you don't notice at a family barbecue and desperately need if your world ever catches fire. We had dinner at Renee and Daniel's house on a Sunday in October, pot roast, the grandkids running through the living room the way kids do when they've had too much soda before dinner. Marcus was in fine form that night, telling a story about a fishing trip on Grand Lake, refilling everyone's tea before they asked, laughing loud, easy, a man without a single thing weighing on his conscience. And then Daniel's hand found mine under the table. He pressed his phone into my palm without turning his head. 7 words on the screen. "Check your retirement account. Don't react." Then, below that, 3 more words. "Say you're dizzy." His jaw was tight. His eyes didn't move. One slow nod, the kind that means trust me, don't ask why yet, just do it. I opened my banking app under the table, hands not quite steady. I hadn't looked at that account in months. Marcus handled the finances. That had been the arrangement. The number on the screen read $9,312. I stared at it like it was written in a language I used to know, and had somehow forgotten overnight. There had been $412,000 in that account. Marcus was mid-laugh across the table at his own joke. My granddaughter was giggling at something on her tablet. The house smelled like rosemary and gravy. I pressed my hand flat against my chest. "I feel dizzy," I said quietly. "I think I need some air." Renee was up out of her chair before I finished the sentence, and even Marcus looked briefly, convincingly concerned. Daniel helped me out to the car, and Marcus stood in the doorway of his aunt's house, waved, and said, "Feel better, Grandpa. Call me if you need anything." I sat in that car, and the first thing I thought about wasn't the money. It was the trip Carol and I always talked about taking to see the Grand Canyon once I retired. The trip I never took because I kept saving instead, kept telling myself there'd be time later. It was the fact that $412,000 was supposed to be the floor under my daughter's life if anything ever happened to me, and now there was no floor at all. And the boy who took it was standing in a warm doorway in Oklahoma City waving like he hadn't done a single thing wrong. The truth never arrives all at once. It comes in pieces, and every piece cuts somewhere different. Picture a 68-year-old man sitting in the passenger seat of his son-in-law's truck on a quiet Sunday evening, engine running, porch lights flicking on down the block, the sound of his own grandchildren still faintly carrying through the walls behind him. That man is staring at $9,312 on a phone screen, and that man is very still, not calm. I need to be clear about that. I was the furthest thing from calm. I was the kind of still that happens when your mind is handed something too large to process and simply refuses to move until it understands what it's looking at. Daniel didn't drive us to a hospital or a police station. He drove us to his credit union's downtown branch, empty on a Sunday evening, our footsteps echoing through the lobby like we were walking into a church. In a way, I suppose we were. He was about to show me something sacred and devastating, and I wasn't going to walk out the same man who walked in. If you've made it this far, and you want more stories like this one, it really does help us if you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Thank you, truly. Daniel closed his office door, sat down, and looked at me the way a surgeon looks at you right before he tells you something you can't unhear. "Walter," he said, and he never called me that. It was always Dad. "I need you to know everything I'm about to show you has been checked 3 separate times. I didn't come to you with a hunch. I came to you with a file." "How long have you known?" I asked. 5 months, he said. 5 months. I sat with that. Didn't get angry yet, because the look on his face told me those 5 months hadn't been easy on him either. "Why did you wait?" I asked. He folded his hands. "Because Renee needed to be completely certain before we destroyed her son in front of her father, and because I needed every exit sealed before Marcus knew a door was even open." Then he opened the folder. He started with the withdrawals. 19 months of them, always between $2,000 and $4,500, never above $5,000, spaced out irregular, never the same week twice. Careful enough to blend into normal spending patterns, sloppy enough that Marcus clearly thought no one would ever add it up. "This has a name," Daniel said, sliding the first printout across the desk. "It's called structuring, keeping withdrawals, under-reporting thresholds, on purpose. It's a federal offense on its own, separate from the theft itself." I looked at 19 months of receipts laid out in a neat, damning timeline. My grandson had stolen from me with the same patience and discipline I'd spent his whole life trying to teach him. He'd finally applied it to something. Just not anything good. Then the pension. Marcus had used the power of attorney I signed at my own kitchen table to contact my pension administrator directly and redirect my monthly distributions into a second account he controlled. The paperwork looked entirely legitimate. Because it was legitimate paperwork, properly filed, properly processed, why would anyone question it? The forms were perfect. My grandson had made certain of that. Then the statements. Marcus had quietly changed the mailing address on the retirement account to a P.O. box he'd rented on Memorial Drive. I'd stopped getting paper statements months ago and never thought twice about it. Because Marcus handled the mail along with everything else. Because that was the arrangement. Because I trusted him without question. I had been flying blind for the better part of a year, and my own grandson was the one who'd turned off the lights. Then the last one. Daniel slid it across separately, deliberately, the way you hand someone the heaviest thing last, once they've had a second to brace. It was a beneficiary change form. My signature sat right there at the bottom, and I remembered exactly the morning it happened. A rushed Tuesday, I hadn't slept. Marcus showed up with coffee and a small stack of papers and said, "Grandpa, just sign these, routine account maintenance. I've already gone through everything." I signed without reading a word. Buried in that stack was a form removing Renee entirely as beneficiary on what remained of my retirement account, replacing her with Marcus, my own hand, my own signature, erasing my daughter from everything I'd spent a lifetime building for her, and I hadn't even known what I was signing. Daniel wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," he said. "And this part is what made me move when I finally did." For months, Marcus had been quietly telling extended family, at church, at cookouts, on phone calls, things like, "Grandpa's really struggling since the diagnosis. I worry about him constantly. I've had to step in way more than people realize." An elder law attorney, Daniel, had already consulted privately, recognized the pattern the second she heard it. Marcus was laying groundwork, patient and quiet, for a guardianship petition. If he could get me declared incapable of managing my own affairs through the courts, everything he was already doing illegally would become legally sanctioned. Everything I still had left would pass fully under his control. He wasn't only stealing from me. He was building a cage out of quiet conversations, one comment at a time, and I hadn't felt a single bar go up. I sat in that office and looked at Daniel Reyes, my daughter's husband, the quiet man nobody notices at a barbecue, the man I'd shared Sunday dinner across from for 9 years, and something in my chest shifted for good. "How did you catch it?" I asked. "Routine fraud pattern review," he said. "The structured withdrawals tripped an internal flag. I pulled the file and saw your name on it, and then I shut my office door," he said, "and didn't say a word to another living soul until I was sure." My phone rang. Renee. Daniel put her on speaker. Her voice was tightly controlled, the voice of a woman holding herself together by force of will and mostly succeeding. She said the kids were fine. Everyone was settled. Marcus was still there, asking if I was okay, hovering, performing worry for an audience of exactly one. Then she paused. "Dad," she said quietly, "before you two left, Marcus hugged me and said he's worried sick about you." Nobody spoke for a second. I told her I just needed some air, that I'd call her later. I thought about what that sentence had cost my daughter. Renee had spent years defending her son, to me, to relatives who whispered things at family gatherings, to her own doubts at 2 in the morning. She had explained him, protected him, loved him past every reasonable limit, because that's what she believed a mother owed her child. And he had used every ounce of that love as cover while he took the one thing meant to protect her family's future. Then Daniel asked, quiet, almost to himself, "What do you want to do, Walter?" Here's the thing about being 68 years old. Sitting in an empty office on a Sunday night with $9,312 to your name, the full weight of it pressing down on every joint in your body. You get two choices. You can be loud. You can call your grandson right now and say every true and terrible thing sitting in your chest. Or you can be something quieter, something colder, something that actually protects the people left standing. I thought about the Grand Canyon trip I never took, about Renee's face if she lost her father's trust fund the way I'd nearly lost my own retirement, about what the next chapter looked like if I let anger drive instead of sense. "I want every door closed before he knows one is open," I told Daniel. "Not for me, for Renee, for the kids. I want them protected first. Everything else comes after." Daniel nodded once. He already had a plan forming. Revenge is loud. Justice moves quiet. I chose quiet. Nobody tells you justice doesn't feel the way the movies promise. You spend your life watching the good guy get his moment, the speech, the satisfaction of the villain finally understanding what he did. You think when it's your turn, it'll feel like winning, like finally exhaling after holding your breath too long. What nobody tells you is that when it's real, when it's your own blood on the other side of it, it doesn't feel like winning at all. It feels like a surgery you needed, necessary and correct and permanent all at once. I drove home to Larchmont Avenue that night and sat in my driveway for the second time in 11 months. The first time, I was trying to figure out how to live with a failing heart. This time, I was trying to figure out how to survive my own grandson. The next morning, I sat across from an elder law attorney named Nadia Foster, whose office sat on Riverside Drive 15 minutes from my house. Daniel had already called ahead. She went through Daniel's file the way a surgeon opens a chest, methodical, unshaken, knowing exactly what needed to come out. By noon that day, the power of attorney Marcus held over my accounts was formally revoked, filed, processed, effective immediately. He lost access before he'd finished his lunch. He had no idea. Nadia then began emergency proceedings to reverse the beneficiary form, restoring Renee's name where it belonged. My daughter was reinstated. Marcus was removed. He still had no idea. Day 2, Daniel's credit union opened a formal internal fraud investigation. The trail he'd spent 5 months quietly assembling was so clean, so complete, that the detective who took the case, a woman named Detective Priya Malhotra from the Tulsa Financial Crimes Unit, told Daniel it was the most organized private citizen's file she'd seen in 14 years on the job. Daniel just nodded and said, "Thank you." Day 3, Marcus showed up at the house with takeout, sat with me while a ball game played on the television, asked how I was feeling after the scare at dinner. "Better," I told him. "Just tired. You know how it is." "You need to take it easy, Grandpa," he said. "I worry about you." I looked at my grandson sitting in my living room and thought about $9,312, about the beneficiary form I hadn't known I was signing, about the quiet groundwork he'd been laying with relatives for months, the cage he was building one comment at a time. I lifted my glass of sweet tea and said, "You're right, son. I'm going to start paying a lot closer attention to everything from here on out." He smiled, satisfied, no idea what was already moving around him. Day 5. My daughter Renee drove to my house on a Wednesday while Marcus thought she was at work. She let herself in with her old key and gathered every document Nadia needed, original files from the back office, papers Marcus never imagined she'd know how to find, because it never occurred to him his mother might stop protecting him long enough to move against him. She told me later she didn't let herself feel anything the whole time she was inside. She felt nothing until she was sitting back in her car with the papers on the passenger seat, and then she sat there for almost 15 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. Day 8. Nadia initiated emergency financial planning to protect what remained, identifying every safeguard still available given the documented fraud. She found paths I didn't know existed, ways to shield what was left even with the account gutted the way it had been. For the first time in 12 days, I slept through the night without waking up at 3 in the morning doing math in the dark. Day 10, Marcus came back again, stayed longer this time, asked careful questions about my health, wondered aloud whether I'd thought about updating my will while I was at it. Just being responsible, Grandpa, just thinking ahead. I looked at him for a long, quiet moment and almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You're right," I said. "I probably should be thinking ahead." He smiled and drove home. Every door around him was already shut. He just hadn't tried the handles yet. Day 12, a Sunday. I called Marcus in the morning. "Come to dinner tonight," I told him. "Bring something nice. We have a lot to be thankful for." He showed up at 6 with a bottle of wine and his widest smile. The table was set carefully. Renee and Daniel came too, and the grandkids, and for a little while it almost felt like an ordinary family dinner, the kind we used to have before I knew what I know now. Marcus sat at the head of the table, charming, generous, refilling glasses, laughing at his own stories, the golden grandson like none of the last 19 months had ever happened. The food was good. The performance was almost convincing. Then, halfway through the meal, there was a knock at the front door. I stood, walked across my own floors in my own house, and opened it. 2 financial crimes, detectives, plain clothes, calm, unhurried, paperwork in hand. I'd met with them 3 days earlier. They knew exactly who they were there for. I heard Marcus stop talking mid-sentence behind me. I stepped aside and let them in. I watched my grandson's face in the moment he understood, and I want to tell you something because it matters. There was no guilt on his face first. His eyes moved fast, to me, to Daniel, to Renee, to the door, looking for an exit that wasn't there anymore. Every door was closed. Renee stood up slowly. She'd had 12 days to think about what she wanted to say, and when the moment finally came, it turned out simpler than anything she'd rehearsed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. "I want you to look at your grandmother's picture on that wall before you leave this house," she said. "Because Carol would be ashamed of you, and I need you to carry that with you, wherever you're going." Marcus was walked out of the house on Larchmont Avenue in handcuffs while his little cousins watched from the hallway, not understanding, and I stood on my own porch and did not feel like I'd won anything. I felt like I'd finally stopped the bleeding. Marcus pleaded guilty 3 months later. The paper trail Daniel built was too complete for any lawyer to argue around. Financial exploitation of an elder, fraud, federal structuring charges. Restitution was ordered. It comes back slowly, in pieces. the same way it left. Some of it will never come back at all. I've made my peace with that, or I'm working on it. Some days that's all a man can honestly say. But my daughter's future is protected. Nadia Foster made sure of that. And I still wake up most mornings and think about how close I came to not noticing at all, how easy it would have been to keep trusting the warmth in someone's voice over the numbers sitting right there in front of me the whole time. I think about something I never fully understood until all of this happened. Marcus was my blood, but Daniel chose me. And when the people who are supposed to love you show you exactly what they're capable of, being chosen by someone who never owed you a thing is what puts you back together. Not all the way, but enough to keep going. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me down in the comments if you've ever had to protect yourself from someone you loved. I read every one. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one.